Good morning, everyone. And let me just make sure all my tech is working. It looks like it is. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Senior Rally Day. I'm Kevin Prindeville. I'm the Executive Director of Justice and Aging, and I'm also going to be your MC for today's program. It's wonderful to be with you all. I miss seeing you all in person. Last year, of course, we couldn't have the Senior Rally Day in person. But as you saw, hopefully in the video clips from the 2019 Senior Rally Day, usually this is the time of year when we're all gathered together on the lawn at the Capitol, celebrating, dancing. And it's wonderful to be gathered again today in this virtual environment, but certainly missing everyone's faces and smiles and energy. But we'll be back together again sometime soon, I'm sure. But as you saw in the video clips, hopefully, before we started the live program here today, it gave you a reminder of where we've been, a historical reference point that shows where all of our work together on the Master Plan for Aging and our years of work to get our governor and the legislature to pay more attention to the needs of older adults, where they really were 2 years ago. And we've come such a long way in the 2 years since then. And today we're going to be celebrating some of those accomplishments and then also thinking about what needs to happen next. You know, obviously, since we last were gathered on that lawn together 2 years ago, a lot has happened. Certainly, we've all been living through the impact of COVID, the pandemic on our lives. And COVID has certainly impacted aging in California and older adults in our communities, particularly. And we can talk about during the event today some of the good things that the state has done to respond to that need, and then some of the opportunities that are in front of us, some of our lessons learned from the difficulties of the last year and how we can build our systems to better serve older adults and our families and communities going forward. So today's program is really going to be structured around one of the other big things that happened this year since we last met was that the governor released the Master Plan for Aging in January. And we're going to get updates on the accomplishments of that master plan and where our focus should be for the remainder of the calendar year from a wide variety of stakeholders. In the morning, we're going to get updates from the governor's office, the California Department of Aging, and a group of advocates and experts and more legislatures throughout this morning program. Then we're going to have a brief break for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we have our advocacy program, an opportunity for all of us to meet with our legislators to share our ideas for what more the state can be doing to prepare for meeting the needs of older adults in our communities. But before we get started, and we really do have a packed program, I want to acknowledge our sponsors and exhibitors. Their support is really crucial to the success of the program today. And I'd also like to acknowledge the legislators that chose to participate in the rally, and many of them have been part of the rally over the years, and we appreciate the support of each of them, and especially the extra effort it takes to participate in these virtual environments. So really glad to see them continuing to be right along with us and supporting our efforts. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with our program. Our first speaker today, I'm really happy to introduce Richard Figueroa. He's the Deputy Secretary to the Governor. Richard opened the Senior Rally program in 2019 and spoke to Governor Newsom's vision for a master plan for aging. So it's wonderful to have Fig back here today to kick off our program in 2021 now that that master plan has been released. And I just want to say what a wonderful partner Fig has been throughout the COVID response and the master plan for aging process. Done really a wonderful job of working with all of us stakeholders in the aging and disability community. So welcome, Fig.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yes, can you hear me? Hope so. Again, my name is Richard Figueroa. I'm a Deputy Cabinet Secretary here in the Governor's Office. I just wanted to help say hello on behalf of the Governor and the Governor's Office for your Senior Rally Day. As Kevin mentioned, it's been quite a challenging time during the last year, faced many unknown circumstances, but through it all, I think we've come out stronger, and have certainly worked with the aging and the disability community in particular to try to address some of the major needs during this COVID environment. As was mentioned early on in the governor's tenure, he announced he was going to have set up a process to do the master plan for aging. As Kevin mentioned, we were able to release it given everything else that was kind of going on. And again, a big shout out to the folks here for the Senior Rally Day, certainly the folks working in the departments, the advocacy director, Mccoy Wade, all the advocates, et cetera, on kind of continuing to work through all these issues, even during the COVID pandemic, understanding that these issues are not going to go away. We're going to have a very large increase in our aging population between now and 2030, and these things absolutely couldn't wait. One of the ways that I would just highlight, the governor intends to kind of continue to move things forward, and particularly focus on older Californians. He's going to appoint for the first time a senior advisor on aging, disability, and Alzheimer's to really advance cross-cabinet initiatives and partnerships between government, the private sector, and philanthropy to really kind of push and kind of move the ball forward. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about that from Director Mccoy Wade a little bit later on, as well as other speakers and things like that. But again, just a real big shout out from the governor's office. I know it's been an extremely trying time for everybody during this last year, and obviously there is lots of sunlight and hope on the horizon with vaccine and the other kind of things we've kind of put in place to help us move through this pandemic successfully. But just know that we're very strongly committed to the master plan for aging. Again, Kim's going to talk a little bit about what we produced in January in terms of the budget, and we'll see what else comes down the road here. But again, a big shout out, thank you from the governor's office for all the people that participated in the master plan for aging, more recently helping us to move through a very, 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 very trying time. I look forward to working in the future. The master plan, we really had to look very broadly at aging issues since late 1990, early 2000, when Governor Gray Davis put together a package called Aging with Dignity, and it really has been a long, long time and long, long overdue. And again, it's the advocacy of people that are here for the rally day today to that kind of made that happen. And again, we're going to need your assistance to kind of carry this through to its conclusion. So again, have a wonderful day today. Look forward to hearing from you folks now and in the future. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Fig, and thanks for being here on behalf of the governor. And we really appreciate the governor's continued commitment to aging. We appreciate many of the things that the governor has done in the last year and in the COVID response to particularly protect older adults in the way that the pandemic had a particularly severe effect on older people. So we welcome and appreciate the governor's partnership and look forward to the things we can do together moving forward, just like you said. And so it's my pleasure to introduce next Mccoy Wade. Kim is the director of the California Department of Aging. It was really under her leadership that the Master Plan for Aging was created, and again was released by Governor Newsom in January. The final results of this master plan is really a call to action. I think Kim did a wonderful job of working to create a plan that had really specific initiatives to undertake and accountability for how we move forward on those initiatives. Director Mccoy Wade is here to provide us with an update on where the state is at in regards to the execution of the master plan and what we can expect during the rest of the year. And after Director Mccoy Wade's presentation, there's going to be a question and answer period during which you can submit questions, and I'll be asking Kim those questions, and we'll have some conversation about how the master plan is moving forward. So Director Mccoy Wade, great to have you.
Good morning. Thanks, Kevin, and great to see Fig and virtually see so many of you here. I'll be quick because I cannot wait to get to question and answer. Yes, this is an exciting day, and I'm so glad it's happening. Despite the year we've had and because of the year we've had, it's more important than ever that we come together and raise our voices. So thank you for being here in this new way. I'm going to tell you 3 things about the master plan: where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So without further ado, let me jump in. Where we've been, first slide. If you can think back to June 2019, when the governor made good on a campaign promise and the State of the State promise to call for a master plan for aging with an executive order calling for a full cabinet work group, a stakeholder work group, a research subcommittee, and a long-term services and supports committee, really reflecting that emphasis on being person-centered and data-driven. And we got to work. And quite a roller coaster journey, which we'll talk about in a second later, we released in January the Master Plan for Aging with the 5 bold goals and 23 strategies for 10 years, talking about housing for all ages and stages, health reimagined so we can have health at home in the communities we want to be in, inclusion and equity, not isolation, caregiving that works, and affording aging. So we released that on a virtual summit a week later. We're thrilled to have it with so many stakeholders, department and cabinet leadership, members of the legislature, really a robust discussion about those 5 goals, and frankly, how we were going to get to work on the initiatives, the over 100 initiatives the cabinet signed off on for the first 2 years. And has to be said, based on a robust process of people just like you weighing in, we had thousands and thousands of comments, whether it was town halls, Wednesday webinars, committee meetings, resulting in over 800 recommendations from the stakeholders, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, which was all deeply informative of the master plan. But I have to pause here and say what we all know, which was 2020 was like no other year, given the COVID pandemic and the particular losses, challenges, and changes for older adults, people with disabilities, families, caregivers, and all of us. And so what I've come to say is really we got 2020 vision in 2 ways in this process. One that I really want to credit Rigo Saborio with from St. Barnabas Senior Services, one of the oldest senior service organizations in the state, as you all well know. Rigo really called us to the urgency. He lifted up the resilience of the people that St. Barnabas was serving, but also the very real suffering. And he really called us to work with more urgency and more focus, as my secretary says, to accelerate this work. We cannot wait any longer to bring justice and choices to all Californians, especially older Californians. And the other piece that was brought to us is by former Assembly member and current Commissioner on Aging, Cheryl Brown, who said, equity cannot be sprinkled in at the end of the baking project. It has to be baked in. And that metaphor, I think we've all had that experience of the chocolate chips on top or the rainbow sprinkles on top versus baked in, really came to be our mantra. And we are striving to hold ourselves accountable to reflect the inequities, the discrimination, the racism, the ageism that infects aging and our quality of life, and root that out with this master plan. So that combination of 2020 vision on urgency and equity is really what's powered us. So next slide. Once we launched, where we are, as Vig just mentioned, the governor's budget came out in January with 2 approaches. One, I hope you see the aging lens really woven and layered into all the big priorities, whether it's housing for all, healthcare for all. I hope you can see that aging lens. That's part of what we aim to do. And the other piece is those targeted aging investments. There were some on increasing geriatric care. There's some on making a no wrong door system statewide, so anyone can call or log on and find the information they need for home and community services as we age. Alzheimer's, a robust package on Alzheimer's. Housing, purchasing, kind of leveraging the Project Home Key of purchasing vacant hotels, vacant assisted living facilities for older adults facing homelessness to help people receive housing and services as we age. So a whole range of proposals that were proposed in January, and of course are making their way through the stakeholder and legislative process now. We also got to work, we don't want there to be one master plan in California, we want there to be dozens and dozens. So we've been working with counties and cities and local leaders to say, only 3 counties in California have a master plan right now for aging. Purposeful Aging Los Angeles, Age Well San Diego, and the planning work in San Francisco. We'd like to see all 58. So lots of work. And I hope when you return home from Senior Rally Day, you plug in, if you weren't already, to local Master Plan for Aging or age-friendly AARP efforts. We also have a data dashboard to hold ourselves accountable. For example, are we preventing falls? We have one of the worst rates of preventable falls in this country. Is our work to prevent falls, modify homes, reducing falls? We're going to hold ourselves accountable with that data dashboard, and happy to do demos for the legislature, for the AAA network, and so many more. And then very soon, I keep saying, but I mean it, we are going to be appointing an impact stakeholder committee. The stakeholder committee is at the heart of this, and impact stands for implementing the master plan for aging in California together. We hope to be convening that very soon, but frankly, it's been nonstop with the pandemic, with vaccines, with the federal stimulus, now state budget season. So it's not for lack of activity in fact, it's the opposite. There's so much happening that we need to take a second to convene our impact committee. And we are working right now, surveyed all the cabinets and departments to produce our first progress report. So that's coming soon. Lastly, give you a little forecast what's ahead. Really, it's focused on the next slide. It's the initiatives that we gave ourselves the homework for the next 2 years. So we are working on that. And as Fig says, you'll see more coming from our state federal stimulus money and in the budget proposals from stakeholders, legislature, and the governor about how we move forward on those initiatives. We are very excited to be very close to working with our friends at AARP to having California become the 8th state to join the nation's network of age-friendly states. So stay tuned, coming very soon. And many of you already know you are serving on, you are working on, whether it's the new Community Living Advisory Committee that started on Friday, a refresh of our Olmstead Committee, or it's a new Equity and Aging, which has met once, we'll be meeting again in June. We'll be diving into LGBT elder data as we're getting more there and have a lot more to do. Broadband, can't say enough about what we're doing to just begin to expand broadband as utility, but also get devices and targeted training into people's hands. And again, a huge priority, how do we make long-term care affordable for all incomes and quality? And the Long-Term Care Insurance Task Force is one of the places we're looking at that essential question, as well as with our partners in Washington, the legislature. Last but not least, if it hasn't been plugged already, I know you all know there are dozens of bills advancing the Master Plan for Aging. Many of you are sponsoring them. Many of you will be here lobbying on them today. And of course, Justice and Aging is tracking them. And so thank you for everything that everybody's doing. This is some of where we're going, but of course, where we're going is where you all lead us. And what you do today to speak to your dreams, your goals, to the bills and budget that power that is going to be the next slide of how we get there. So thank you so much for doing that. And I'll hand it back to you, Kevin.
Great, thank you so much, Kim. And again, congratulations on all the work on this, and thank you for your commitment over the last year to, like you said, address the urgency of the moment we were living in with COVID, and then also to make progress on this master plan and to do so in a way that really did, I think, bake equity in. And that's not a one-time process. So I know that you share the commitment to making sure that equity continues to be at the center of what we're doing, and that urgency continues, even as hopefully we get some relief from the urgency we've had this last year of the crisis of the pandemic, but there's still a lot of urgency about the needs of our community. So we have questions coming in from our audience here today. So the first question is, what's the best way to tune into Master Plan for Aging developments and to track the implementation?
Great question. So at the very least, you should be signed up for the Together We Engage email updates, which continue. And so you can find that at our Department of Aging website and the Master Plan for Aging homepage, mpa.aging.ca.gov. And that's where we announce things like the Community Living Committee is meeting or the Long-Term Care Insurance Commission is meeting, and where we'll absolutely be putting out the announcement on impact and that progress report coming soon.
And will there also be a way that work on the particular initiatives is tracked in some type of public way? Or will that happen in the impact committee meetings? How do you envision that?
That is a work in progress. We have lots and lots of spreadsheets now with all the initiatives and notes on which department, which stakeholder, which legislature, which budget initiative. And so we are working to roll that up in a way that is useful and workable. So this is a perfect time for me to give full credit to Amanda Lawrence, our project director, who is the master of all of that. And frankly, our philanthropic partners who are helping us figure out how to both track it for accountability and for transparency. So yes, a version of that will be coming in the future in a more public way. Probably the interim step will be some summary documents and some progress on here's ones that are green, are moving full steam ahead. Here's some that are moving a little bit ahead. Here's some we haven't got to. All 130 haven't quite yet transparent about.
Great. Well, thanks, Kim. And you mentioned the legislature in there. And our next question is about the legislature. And it notes that the current legislative session has seen over 30 bills introduced that address the Master Plan for Aging. And the question is, what can we do? What advice do you have for us, Kim, about how we can see even more legislative action around issues of aging and disability and the Master Plan for Aging in the future?
Sure. So I will give two pieces of advice, which is part one from our work with our cabinet, which is similar to the legislature and it covers every single issue. And we have really, in a collaborative way, challenged every cabinet member in every department that aging is your business too. And your work involves an aging lens. And just most recently talking to the Secretary of Natural Resources and how they're thinking about their parks planning with an aging lens because of the master plan for aging process. So I would say every committee is an aging committee, is my view. Every committee has an important role, whether you're thinking about accessory dwelling units, whether you're thinking about caregiving, whether you're thinking about parks. And so I would really encourage the connection with all legislators about what aging means to them, their personally, their family, their policies, their programs, help them join the family of aging. And then I do think we also at the same time need those targeted aging investments. We know there are things particular for aging, whether it might be around dementia, whether it might be around geriatric care, and we do need to cultivate our leaders on that. You know, my dream is an aging caucus, just like I've seen be so effective on women's issues and Latino issues. So I would love people, you know, we have our leaders. We know people like Assemblymember Adrc Nazarian and Senator Dr. Pan, and there's so many others. So just continue to build on that legacy of leadership. And lastly, as a former advocate, I will say to you what I always say to myself when I was an advocate is work together, work together, work together. The good news is that there are many aging and disability advocates. The challenge is that there are many aging and disability advocates. So how do you all come together? And I think the way that the stakeholders came together for the master plan is a great model. And I hope that we continue to build on that and have I didn't say unanimous, but a unified community in how we push forward.
Yeah, that's all great advice. And you talked in there about both trying to take the approach that every committee and every legislature should have something to say about aging, because aging is a part of every policy issue that the state is dealing with. And then you also talked about needing to develop those aging specific priorities and ideas as well. And this next question is more about the aging specific part of state government. And it's a question about the future organizational structure Department of Aging. And what do you see there? What's changing there that you can share? And what impact will any changes about the structure at CDA, what impact will that have on county AAAs and how services are being provided at the local and county level?
Absolutely. Well, it really is the same approach. Both we as the aging department are laser focused on aging. And again, the inclusive view of aging, all of us are aging, people with disabilities are aging, LGBTQ is aging, and caregivers are caring for aging. So we have a robust view of aging. We do have a lot to work to do at our department to modernize it. And we are working very hard on things like a standard data system so that we can help make it easier for people to access our services, connect to our services, and be transparent about the performance of our services. We also are looking at something called AAA CDA 2.0, which is looking at the way we set up our Aging Older Americans Act. I'll be specific here for this group because I know you are the experts and know this. Was set up in the 70s at a very different time in aging policy and aging demographics and aging services. And so we think it's time for a fresh look in partnership with the Commission on Aging, the AAAs, our county leaders, to look at how do aging services really serve as that hub and that bridge to social services, to healthcare, to tribal nations as well. How can we make sure we have strong aging hubs in every community? And so that's a question we are going to be engaging with some consultants on and the stakeholders on through our Older Americans Act state plan, which is posted publicly, the draft. So lots to come to really make sure that CDA can be the leader that it needs to be in aging. Now, again, the second piece of that is layering aging in across all departments and agencies. And that's something else that we're really looking to do is how can we help be a resource to sister departments in their work? And so you see in the spring finance letter, if I may, a budget proposal for CDA to create a policy shop. Its first ever policy shop on aging policy so that we would have experts on housing policy and experts on digital divide policy and experts on equity, in addition to our terrific Older Americans Act programs and Medicaid's programs. So I think that's how we're trying to do, again, that same two-step. How do you layer aging in across all the administration's work, and how are we that resource, that backup center for those of you who speak legal services to all departments and agencies? And then how can we also be that target and make sure that we have accountable, performing, equitable aging services for every older adult in California?
Yeah, that's great. And Fig mentioned, and you had a note about it too, that the Master Plan for Aging also was creating this senior advisor position in the governor's office to be able to do some of the types of things you're talking about that CDA also is going to be able to do, hopefully, which is work on these cross-department. And then the senior advisor in the governor's office, I think, also being able to go cross agencies and cross cabinet positions. Do you have any more to say about the status of that senior advisor position, or how advocates can engage in making sure that senior advisor position is filled and filled soon?
Yeah, I can only really give you the kind of, it was proposed in the January budget, as folks know, so it's making its way through the process. It would be, assuming it is supported and blessed by the legislature and in the final budget, it would be a position that'd be in effect as of July 1st. So then the question is filling it. So I think all signs, I don't know what Fig said, but I'm going to assume he said it's on track. And the question will be just getting a strong and collaborative voice into that seat so that we continue to make progress at every level.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. I know that's very important to our community that we have that person at that level to help accomplish so many of the things that we've laid out as important. Our next question is about one of those important things, and you touched on it. The work with AARP to create an age-friendly network in the state. And the question is specifically who or which department is taking the lead on working with AARP on that effort. All right. So it's you, and you want to say more about that? Yes.
Stay tuned. We are very, very close to having an announcement on that. We are working very closely with AARP, and we'd hope to have an announcement here, but it'll be more good news in the coming days, and which I hope is a lot of good news on aging in the next few days. So coming soon.
Okay, great. The next question kind of goes back a question to talking about how CDA is organizing Older Americans Act funds and how those are used across the state. And I believe that CDA has an open comment period right now, taking comments on the state plan for Older Americans Act funds. And maybe you could say a little bit about that. And the specific question is, when are comments due? But maybe could you give a little bit of background for the audience as to what that document is and how it's different than the master plan and what kind of input you're looking for?
Sure. So the Older Americans Act state plan, here's how I think about it. The master plan is across all departments and agencies, any policy and program. And I really see the Older Americans Act as the keystone, if you will, of the arch. They're not the biggest pot of money, but they are an essential pot of money in that they provide services, whether it's legal services, whether it's family caregiver respite, and of course, what we're best known for is our home delivered meals and meals in community centers. But it's so much more of all those wonderful flexible funds, no income tests, no immigration tests. They are just gold. These are gold. And we're blessed that they have been dramatically increased by 4 stimulus packages out of Washington. So we have more resources than ever before to meet never before. For those Older Americans Act plan, we have a required federal plan due every 4 years. So we have looked at the master plan and said, okay, what is the role of the Older Americans Act programs and partnerships in advancing the master plan? And proposed a set of goals and objectives specific to the Older Americans Act funds that will advance the master plan. Just like Medicaid has goals and housing has goals, our Older Americans Act as well. So there's things in there having to do with no wrong door, taking that state. There's things in there having to do with much better data around how we serve LGBT elders, in particular, data we've been collecting for the past 2 years, but need to share out and analyze, quite frankly. We're also looking at creating a designated position for partnerships with California's tribal organizations so that we can be very clear, government to government, we are meeting the needs of tribal elders, whether they live in tribal lands or in urban environments. And that was my call this morning, actually, just discussing that and how we can make sure vaccines are getting up those last mile roads to where people live. So it's those kind of specific levers that we're looking at. The draft plan is posted. I believe comments are due by Friday, although I want to say that we had a survey. So the whole plan is there, the summary is there, and a survey is there, and the email box is there. We also got great feedback, which we should have known to translate the survey into a couple languages. So we're going to push the survey out in Spanish and Chinese in coming days, and then there'll be a 2-week window on that as well. So, and then we also have our 33 areas are sending in their local plan update right now. So we'll have that input, and then we also have some federal input. We'll take all that, come up with a final draft, submit it by July 1, and then pending approval by the feds, it goes into effect October 1st. It guides our 4-year work, and we'll update it annually again in that continuous improvement. But we really do hope it's like I said, it's a cornerstone or a keystone of, but one of many lanes of work that we all have to be, moving in the same direction to really have the master plan succeed.
Great, thank you, Kim. The next question relates to maybe some of those other lanes of work. I'm going to ask a question. It might be, I'm not sure if you're best positioned to answer it, but the question is, can you touch on the way the governor's budget lists budget totals? The question says there's missing zeros, so it's confusing at first. And then there's also, in addition to the question, kind of a call to action. You need to continue to advocate for appropriate budget amounts so that there's enough money to accomplish the master plan for aging objectives. So maybe you can answer that question specifically, or maybe you could speak a little bit about what was in the governor's budget in January that related to the master plan and how the governor is thinking about how we fund this work. And then, maybe there's going to be something slightly different that comes out in the May revise in a couple of weeks. But at least kind of what can you share now about how the governor is thinking about the budget and investments in the master plan for aging?
Sure. So absolutely, when the budget came out, we did strive to produce with agency a summary of all the master plan for aging budget investments. And it is the good news is that it's a little challenging because it's not just the Department of Aging investments. There were investments at OSHPD, our workforce department, on increasing geriatric care. There was investments at CDPH, public health, on Alzheimer's. There were investments at social services on new housing efforts. And of course at DHCS on the new Medicare office, as well as the Medicaid CalAIM innovation project. So that's the good news, but you're right, it is challenging and we strive to write it. We're very happy. We have a new communications director who started it in real person speak and not finance speak of millions, billions. So I hear you on that. The more we can do it in plain language, the more we'll try to translate from finance. I will say one issue that has been a challenge in our field for a long time is, well, how many meals do you need? How much fall prevention do you need? And we haven't really had kind of great evidence on that because of different wait lists or different systems and different, but one of the things that's been really nice this cycle was when legislators say, well, how much do you need for falls prevention? We can say, well, currently $5 million is being provided for falls prevention from the general fund. And currently some is going from our federal OAA funds. And here's how many people we've served. And now I can point to the data dashboard on aging and show how many preventable falls are happening in California. And you can have the gap between those two numbers of here's who we're reaching with our current programs that we know of, and here's how many preventable falls they are. And people can see the difference between the need and the investment. And you can go all the way down the line. How many people are online? How many devices did we give out? How many people report food insecurity? How many are getting CalFresh or congregate or in-home meals? So the data dashboard is really allowing us, if we all lean into it, and I know it needs more improvements, it will always be improving to have more data and be more user-friendly, but to tell the story of our need. And as we all know, the gap between what the need is and what our services are is immense. And it also is allowing us to be clearer about food insecurity, for example, isn't only going to be filled with Older Americans Act. CalFresh has a role, medically tailored meals have a role, SSI has a role, lots of things have a role in helping people not be food insecure. So we're hoping that we can help do a better job telling our story, telling the story of older adults, and both what we're doing well and where there's a lot more ground to cover.
So the next question is about particularly how does the master plan for aging help more people age in place? What are the initiatives that help meet that goal, and how does that goal fit with the goals that were identified as the 5 goals in the plan?
Right. There's a reason that the first goal is housing and the second goal is health. They go hand in hand. Housing is health and health is housing. And so both need to happen. We need many, 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 many more housing options in California that are affordable. So you see a lot of energy now around things like accessory dwelling units or in-law units to create that opportunity for older adults to live with younger people or with caregivers in new and more affordable ways. Also some thinking about, are we counting for senior housing and multifamily housing in the right direction, in the right ways, recognizing all of our changes in demographics. So I think there's a lot happening to create more housing, if you will, in the housing first, but we all know it's housing plus. And so that's why that second goal around health and really health at home, how can we move our health dollars from the clinic, from the doctor's office home? And I think that's what you're seeing in CalAIM as we try to do a managed LTSS. That's what you're seeing in the Medicare office. How can we leverage Medicare better and work with our federal government on that? The story that I just heard from a West Health Foundation call is about an older adult who shows up at an ER with a broken wrist. And typically healthcare dollars would say, let me check your head for a concussion, let me bandage you, treat your wrist, cast your wrist, and send you home. Healthcare system is done. But we all recognize is we don't want that person to come back in 3 months with another fall or a broken hip. So we need to say, geez, let's look at your medicines. Do you have an interaction with medicines that's making you dizzy? Let's look at your refrigerator. Do you have the foods so your blood sugar doesn't drop? Let's look at your steps. Do you need a grab bar or something put in? Let's look at who you live with. Did somebody travel and you were home alone and had to do something that you normally wouldn't have done? Why did you fall? And can the health dollars pay for all the answers to that? That's what we're trying to figure out. If we can get our health dollars to come pay for that, then the person doesn't fall, we save our healthcare dollars, and you can live at home longer. So we learned a lot from COVID when people did stay home and when people were living in nursing homes in isolation about what we need to do to create that new system. And I think the opportunity has never been greater coming out of COVID with what's happening with Medicaid, with our DHCS leadership, and what's happening with Washington, and what's happening with all of you. So now's the time to make it happen. And I do think there's great energy and synergy coming together to implement both the housing side and the health side, and then importantly, bridge them.
And you touched on something important there, Kim, around COVID and our experiences in nursing homes, and how we saw that older adults living in nursing homes were particularly likely to contract COVID and die from COVID. And then also because of the restrictions we put in place to protect people, also ended up in isolation if they were living in nursing homes during the crisis. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about lessons learned, both what do we need to change about nursing homes and what kind of appetite is there in the administration to make changes to the way that we regulate nursing homes to address some of the problems that occurred during COVID, but that we know are related to longstanding problems in institutional settings. And then what are we doing to create more opportunity for people to get that care outside of institutions? So could you speak a little bit more to those two pieces of this long-term care challenge we have in front of us?
Sure. And thank you for, it is a challenge. It's a challenge for the country. It's a challenge for our all states. And it's been really important to see what other states and the nation are doing. And of course, the legislature has a package of bills in this area as well. Let me just touch on a couple issues that have been raised by, we've been very lucky in California to have so many experts in geriatrics and congregate settings who've been able to brief the administration and advise the administration. And some of the three of the issues I'd say that have come up to the forefront, you see them in the master plan as well. One is the direct care workforce. Secretary Julie Su from Labor Workforce Development Agency has been a leader in how do we help the workforce have good jobs, which of course we know good jobs is essential for quality care. And so I think there are proposals, as you hear from Washington, about the caregiver economy and direct care. What can we do in California to make these jobs, fastest growing personal care in the state, good jobs? This is an essential piece that I think there's a lot more to do on. High road workforce wages, we got to have those conversations. A second piece is the physical building. We've been really inspired by what's coming out of DC in terms of the veterans homes nationally are on a long journey to move to small home architecture, to move away from the large institutions, but into a collection of pods that create those relationships, hire staff. So we're looking at architecture, small home pieces, and that would be something that our state, again, OSHPD and other departments would be looking at of what's the right size for the nursing homes when people need that level of medical care. A third angle, of course, is the money, and that our DHCS is increasingly looking at where its Medicaid dollars flow and how do you balance from nursing homes to home and community care. So I think greater transparency around The Medicaid dollar and where it flows is also a part of the mix. And then I will just say, again, thanks to, I said 3, but I'm already at 4. Thanks to the leadership of First Lady Maria Shriver and others, I think the real issues around dementia and nursing homes as well. Nursing homes are there for people who need a level of medical clinical care, and we want to be sure that the people who are there need that care. And if there are other issues, hunger, malnutrition, dementia that could be treated in a lower level of medical care in a more of a community-based setting, we ought to strive to build those and create those and support those. So I think that dementia lens, again, if I can use that, is going to help us think about not just nursing homes, but the other congregate settings over at our friend CDSS, the licensed settings. And do we have the diversity of settings that are affordable, that are in the community, that have services? There's so much potential there to create different models of homes that we really need to explore, so that the nursing home isn't just the only thing there, the only thing that Medicaid will pay for, but is really the right solution for the right time, and more people have more options that they can afford in the communities they want to live in, with the people they want to live with, and the services they need.
Yeah, and I'll say I think that we definitely need some bold thinking and bold proposals about shifting more care out of those institutional settings, while we need to be more aggressive at the state about how we're monitoring, providing oversight and accountability within those facilities. So I think that we've had longstanding problems in California, and we need to get serious about addressing those to ensure quality and safety in those facilities. So we're hoping that that's something that the governor will be willing and have an appetite to continue to work on.
Yeah, and again, without Dr. Aragon at CDPH and Director Johnson at CDSS are both laser focused on that as well. So agreed, there is much more. I should have mentioned, of course, the core enforcement and health and safety and compliance remains a priority.
Yeah, great. So shifting to a different topic, somebody here asking, how can we get involved in or learn about the California Broadband Council? And maybe you can, to that question, as well as how the master plan for aging looks at the issue of digital divide and making progress there among older adults and people with disabilities.
Sure. So the California Broadband Council, I can't do their website by heart, but it is a public council that is run by our State Department of Technology, that is public meetings and public announcements, and is responsible for executing the governor's vision of broadband for all. And importantly, the executive order calling for a broadband for all plan named 2 priority communities, students and the Department of Education, and older adults and the Department of Aging. So we were very pleased that it had the intergenerational approach, and both kids and older adults were centered in the broadband plan. So we all agree that we need 3 things. We need the broadband connectivity, we need the device, and we need the support and training, not just IT support, but how to actually get it set up and work on it and leverage it, whether it's for telehealth or video chat or whatever else you might be doing. We at CDA are really seeing it as 2 roles we can play. One is policy. As we stand up our policy shop, we want to be sure that we continue to be at the table as these discussions are had about broadband affordability, broadband accessibility, making it, again, more like a utility. But the other level that we've already started to pull is our program lever. So we are distributing donated devices from Google smart speakers through our AAA networks, and we are purchasing iPads from AT&T that come with broadband and IT support through our AAA network, hoping to expand to MSSP and CBAS, maybe also long-term care ombuds. We got to figure out some issues there about who owns the device, et cetera, but we are working through those important details. And I think we're increasingly looking at how do we provide better support to people who do want to bring digital tools and resources to their senior center or community center or adult day health or MSSP program or ombuds. We need to do more to help all of us be better providers and support of those services. So we're exploring some options. We've got great models in California with the San Francisco Tech Council, San Diego Oasis, and we need to do more to kind of lift up those models and connect them to programs, which then of course connect to people. So much more to come on both the program and policy side.
Well, we're being asked to wrap up pretty soon, but I'm going to sneak in one more question, Kim. And that is about something you spoke to at the beginning. But what is the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the master plan for aging? And what is the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy And how will we ensure that equity is part of the state's planning and execution around aging and disability?
So I think we are modeling what is sometimes called intersectionality, that we are laser focused on age and ageism. That is what to be involved with aging it involves. But we recognize the diversity of aging and we recognize the inequities of aging. And in fact, I sometimes feel like aging is the report card on the discrimination you experienced throughout your life. We see it in life expectancy, we see it in life savings, home equity. It's really the cumulative effects of what has been the discrimination that you have experienced in your life shows up in aging. And so how are we going to do with that in aging? And so I think being the centering of that and to center that age and race and age and sexuality and age and income all dramatically influence your experience of aging, and that we need to be clear-eyed about that. Who are we talking about when we talk about aging? And so part of that is having all those voices at the table, borrowing the all-important philosophy from our disability advocates of nothing about us without us. It's also holding ourselves accountable for metrics that look at not just everybody over 60, one group. Well, that's a quarter of the state. What about what zip code? What about what decade of age? What family status? These are all really, what race and what ethnicity? These are all really important pieces. And then I think I'm also really proud of work we're just trying to do about, let's talk about aging and serious mental illness. Let's talk about aging and coming out of the correctional system. Let's talk about all sides of aging so that we really, we're there for all of us as we age and really represent the best of what a California for all ages can mean. And then lastly, I will just say, there's so much joy in all of our state's cultural traditions around aging, and so much respect and reverence and inclusion and beauty and strength and resilience that it would be foolish to not tap into that and to not follow that legacy in building a California for all ages. So again, meeting with tribal communities this morning, there's so much that we are going to learn from that partnership, and that's going to inform our state, and we'll be better for it. So I just think it's all keeping with our secretary's vision that we be person-centered and data-driven and equity-focused by any of those measures. That's what a master plan for aging would do, is center diversity and celebrate it, as well also remedying the discrimination that is too much a legacy of our country and our state. But hold us accountable. Yeah. That's our vision. You got to hold us to it.
Yeah, well, we certainly will. And I'll just speak to that too briefly as someone who participated in the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. I think I heard our aging community talking more about issues of equity and inclusion than I ever had before. And I think that's a credit, like you said, to people like Rigo Sabario and Cheryl Brown, and a response to the moment we're living in as a country of trying to be more honest about where we are and more serious about listening to and understanding experiences people have throughout their lives, and then how that shows up in aging, right? And so I know that we've been working with you, Kim, to try to get data, for example, on vaccine distribution, not just for all older adults, but how about Black older adults? How about Latinx older adults? So that we can really get into those inequities and develop strategies that address the experiences people have that are unique to them and not monolithic just as older people. So I know we're going to help hold you accountable there, and we're going to both look for those structures that we can put in place as well as specific policies. And that's all we have time for with you today, Kim. We really appreciate you taking so much time. As I said at the start, it's just been wonderful to work with you, and a real inspiration to all of us that work in the aging and disability space to have a partner like you helping do this planning, and then also to help make it real. So thanks for your efforts, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Well, I feel the same way, Kevin, to you and to everybody who's here rallying. Remember, we all said we don't want this to be a plan on the shelf, and it would be if it wasn't for things like today. So you are the ones who are taking it off the shelf and taking it to the streets, if you will, and to the halls of power. So thank you for doing that so that we can really, truly all celebrate our success and, most of all, change people's lives for the better. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kim. Well, that was wonderful. And again, we really thank Kim for taking the time today. Our next speaker is a colleague of Kim's. Adam Willoughby is the Assistant Director for Legislation and Public Affairs at the California Department of Aging. And we've invited Adam today to give a more specific update on the governor's 2021-2022 budget. So welcome, Adam.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me? Great. So as Kevin noted, I'm Adam Willoughby, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Director for Legislation here at the Department of Aging. And I'm just really happy to be here with you all today to celebrate this Senior Rally Day and really take a moment to elevate issues of importance to California's community of older adults and adults with disabilities. I'd also like to express appreciation to California Senior Legislature for putting this event together. Special thanks to John Pointer and Janice Bailey for all their hard work. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So as Kevin noted, I've been asked to talk a little bit about the governor's budget and its proposed investments in aging well. And so some of the specific topics that I'm going to cover will include some general observations about California's budget. I will highlight the Senate budget's recently released priorities in terms of aging. I'll talk a little bit about CDA's proposed budget and the federal stimulus support packages that you heard referenced in the previous panel. I'm also going to talk a little bit about proposed new investments in aging well, and then I'll close with talking about CDA's BCPs or budget change proposals. So next slide, please. Great. So, overall, at the highest level, I think CDA, we are cautiously optimistic about this budget. There are no proposed cuts to existing programs as there was in last year's May revise to our two optional Medi-Cal programs that we operate, CBAS and MSSP. And there are significant investments that I'll talk about both to ongoing aging programs as well as bold new investments. Ken mentioned some of those in the previous panel. And so CDA is also very encouraged at the likely prospect of having some or all of our budget change proposals approved, which would create even greater investments into CDA. And again, I'll talk about those here in a moment. The next point I'd like to hit is related to tax receipts. Despite the roughly 2.7 million jobs that California lost since the onset of the pandemic in March and April of 2020, California's tax receipts, which include the personal income tax, the corporate tax, and the sales tax, have been outpacing estimates, which is primarily due to California's progressive tax structure, where higher wage earners are taxed more. And as we know, most of the jobs that were lost in the pandemic were lower wage jobs. So these are folks that could not do their work virtually, as many higher wage earners have been able to do. And so as of April, tax receipts, according to one estimate, are 14% higher than was estimated in the governor's budget, which equates to about $16.6 billion. So next, talk a little bit about the filing extension. So as we know, the traditional tax filing deadline of April 15 was extended to May 17th to give folks a little bit more time and space to complete their taxes due to the pandemic. And the practical effect of this extension has been that the Department of Finance, who can normally see tax filings by about mid-April, which they use to frame the May revise, they're having to rely on estimates to frame the May revise, which we expect to be released on or before May 15th. Okay, so next slide, please. So the Senate budget priorities. A couple of weeks ago, the Senate Democrats released their budget priorities in a package they call Build Back Boldly for the 2021-22 fiscal year and beyond. And this slide shows those priorities, and I'd like to highlight a few of these. In the first one, you'll notice that there is intent language to end suspension. There is intent to end suspension language for aging programs. And so in the previous year's budget, the Department of Aging's Aging and Disability Resource Connection Program, or ADRC, and the nutrition program contain suspension language, which means that if funding levels could be reduced or eliminated if tax receipts fell below a certain level. Number 4 on this slide, this priority tracks closely with an active piece of legislation that some folks on this call may be familiar with, SB 107, Scott Wiener bill, which would require the Department of Social Services to develop a simplified CalFresh application for folks 60 and over and folks with disabilities. Number 6 on this slide tracks closely to a proposal in the governor's budget that would provide one-time resources to our sister department, Department of Social Services, to purchase some existing facilities. So residential care facilities for the elderly and adult residential care facilities for the purposes of rehabilitating them and providing more affordable housing. Also, number 7 tracks closely with the proposal in the governor's budget that would provide additional resources to another sister department, OSHPD, which Kim mentioned in the previous section. So OSHPD has a department called the Health Professions Education Foundation. And the idea is to provide financial incentives to geriatric healthcare professionals to try and grow that pipeline of professionals. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time to acknowledge the Senate for prioritizing up these priorities to help ensure California's older adults and folks with disabilities have the resources they need to age well. Next slide, please. So this slide is about CDA proper, CDA's budget. So you will see so these are CDA's core programs for the 2021-22 budget year, contrasted to those that we received in the previous budget year, 2020-21, which serve as a baseline for comparison. And so, you know, I think overall proposed funding amounts are very similar to last year's budget act. You may notice that there's a slight reduction for most programs, which is because of the savings that CDA and other departments are being able to achieve as a result of telework. So these are things like not spending money on things like travel and equipment and electricity and those types of things. And so overall, you know, you can see that we feel that this is a very healthy proposed governor's budget for CDA's existing programs. And if I could just relate one additional comment, there was a question in the previous session that some of the numbers may be missing some zeros. And that's just sort of how we display these numbers. These numbers are in millions. So what you would do is add 3 zeros to each of these numbers. It just makes it easier to display. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide, please. Great. So federal stimulus packages. Again, you heard these alluded to in the previous segment, and I just want to spend a little bit of time on these. So since March of 2020, there have been 4 federal coronavirus relief packages that provided a variety of supports to individuals and state and local governments. The first two packages, Families First Coronavirus Response Act and the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as CARES, these cumulatively provided roughly $84 million to the Department of Aging that we have used to support various Older Americans Act services, including nutrition, supportive services such as assisted transportation, case management and personal care, and long-term care ombudsman services. These federal funds have helped CDA and our local partners and providers to serve an unprecedented number of home-delivered meals to the tune of 28 million in 2020. And I am happy to report that we are actually on track to outpace that figure in 2021. So in this first quarter of 2021, our partners and providers have already distributed 10 million meals, 10 million home delivered meals. So we're very proud and fortunate to see that number increasing. The next two packages that you'll see on the slide there, HR 133, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. This was signed by President Trump in December 2020. And it provided an additional $17.5 million for senior nutrition services to CDA, as well as $417,000 for long-term care ombudsman activities, and supplemental vaccine funding in the amount of $5.2 million for the AAAs and $1.6 million for the Aging and Disability Resource Connections, the ADRCs. The next and most recent federal stimulus plan is the American Rescue Plan. And this was signed by President Biden in March 2021. And we estimate that this will result in nearly $147 million for California's Older Americans Act programs. And so these funding amounts would include roughly $48 million for supportive services, $78 million for senior nutrition, nearly $5 million for preventative health, nearly $15 million for family caregiver services, and $1 million for elder abuse prevention services. So in all federal stimulus packages, we estimate that we will have provided approximately $255 million to local partners and providers to support older adults and adults with disabilities during this pandemic. So can't underscore enough the importance that these federal resource stimulus funds have played. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Great. So earlier I went over CDA's budget of our core programs. This slide is a little bit different insofar as these are proposed new state investments for aging well, not all of them which would be housed at the Department of Aging. So I'll briefly walk through these 8 new investments that are contained in the governor's budget. The first one, expanded facilities to support housing. I mentioned this earlier, but this proposal would allocate $250 million to sister Department of Social Services to acquire and rehabilitate adult residential facilities and RCFEs, residential care facilities for the elderly, for the purposes of expanding housing for low-income older adults. And you'll also note the similarity to the proposal that was in the Senate's package as well. The next one, number 2, a bold and equitable path forward on Alzheimer's. This proposal would invest $17 million to our sister Department of Public Health, to do a number of things in this space, including conducting a public education campaign on brain health, providing new training and certification for caregivers, expanding training in standards of care for healthcare providers, providing grants to communities to become more dementia friendly, and conducting research to strengthen California's leadership on disparities and equity in Alzheimer's. So number 3, ADRC statewide expansion. Again, ADRC is our Aging and Disability Resource Connection. This proposal would invest $7.5 million to CDA for the purposes of expanding ADRC coverage statewide. And this program is also more commonly or colloquially known as the No Wrong Door program. And this proposal was, if some of you will recall, a key recommendation that was contained in the Master Plan for Aging, as well as in the Governor's Task Force on Alzheimer's Disease Prevention and Preparedness. So moving on, number 4 is the IHSS backup provider system. This proposal would invest $5.3 million to sister department, Department of Social Services, to extend and enhance the IHSS or in-home supportive services backup provider system and a provider wage differential. The next one is the MPA placeholder. So this proposal would invest $5 million to Department of Aging as a placeholder to further implement the Master Plan for Aging. And so these discussions are sort of ongoing in terms of what specifically those funds might be used for. There is a proposal in the governor's budget to sort of earmark or hold those dollars. Number 6 is the proposal to increase geriatric care workforce. This proposal would invest $3 million to, again, our sister department, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, their Health Professions Education Foundation, to grow and diversify California's pipeline of geriatric medicine workforce. And again, you'll note the similarity to this one with that of the proposal that was in the Senate's package. Number 7, this is the Office of Medicare Innovation and Integration. So this proposal would create a new office within the Department of Healthcare Services to provide leadership and expertise to coordinate care for Medicare beneficiaries in California, including both Medicare-only beneficiaries and folks that are dually eligible for Medicare and Medi-Cal, also known as duals. And so this proposal is consistent with the Master Plan for Aging insofar as it attempts to improve care coordination and integration and enhance access to long-term services and supports. The next proposal, which was again discussed in the previous panel, this is the Senior Advisor on Aging, Disability, and Alzheimer's that would be in the governor's office, you know, for the purposes of sort of coordinating at the highest level across cabinet initiatives and partnerships to really help realize the California for all ages. So as you can see, the governor's budget proposes substantial, bold new investments in aging well in various different departments within Health and Human Services Agency, as well as in the governor's office, to the tune of roughly $287 million. So substantial new investments in aging well. Next slide, please. Great, so this slide is about CDA's BCPs, or budget change proposals. So a budget change proposal is a request submitted by the administration to the legislature that requests changes in funding level funding levels for existing programs, or to propose new programs or activities that are not currently authorized by the legislature. So CDA has submitted 4 of these BCPs to the legislature for consideration this year, and I will walk you through these here. So The first one is the Master Plan for Aging implementation. So this request is for 20 permanent positions to implement the Master Plan for Aging, which would be done through a combination of policy, technology, data, project management, and support. And so, in order for California to be successful in implementing the master plan over the next 10 years, we believe that these new positions are necessary just because the department is not currently staffed to support or has the capacity for these increased responsibilities. So that's the first one. The second one is to extend and increase funding to the Aging and Disability Resource Connection, or ADRC, or No Wrong Door, whatever you like to call it. And so this request is for 13 permanent positions in CDA's ADRC branch, which would help to facilitate and sustain statewide expansion of the ADRC, or No Wrong Door program, which currently only operates in 6 counties throughout the state. And again, as we know, establishment of a statewide ADRC program was a key recommendation of both the Master Plan for Aging and in the Governor's Task Force on Alzheimer's Disease Prevention and Preparedness. The next one, number 3, this proposal is for our HICAP modernization. HICAP is our Health Insurance Counseling and Advocacy Program. And so this request is for 3 limited term positions in CDA's HICAP branch, and for $1.4 million in local assistance dollars in order to modernize the state's HICAP program, which was created, I believe, in the early 80s. And so some of these modernization activities would include things like updating trainings for counselors, data collection and reporting processes, and enhanced staffing at local HICAP programs. This modernization is again consistent with the Master Plan for Aging's goals to reimagine healthcare by helping older adults access services that they need to live at home, improve their health, and increase their quality of life. And then finally, number 4, this is a proposal to stand up the Office of Long-Term Care Patient Representative here at the Department of Aging. The idea is that the patient representative would serve on interdisciplinary teams in skilled nursing facilities to make medical decisions for patients that may be incapacitated or do not have a legal representative to make decisions on their behalf. And so this request is for 6 permanent positions within CDA, again, for providing representation on behalf of patients in SNFs and ICS, intermediate care facilities. And so some of you may also know the similarity of this proposal to a proposal that's currently going through the legislative process, Dr. Pan's bill, SB 460. So those are our 4 BCPs that are currently under consideration by the legislature. And when the May revise comes out, in a few days here, we'll have a lot more sort of details in terms of which of these proposals will make it in. And so we are, again, as I mentioned at the outset, we're cautiously optimistic about this year's budget. Let's see, we can go to the next slide here. So that concludes my formal presentation. I hope it was informative. And I've also included my contact info on this slide. If folks have questions or comments, do feel free to reach out to me offline. And so again, thanks to CSL for putting this event together, and was very happy to be here with you all today. and just sign off by saying thanks and be well.
Thank you, Adam. That was a wonderful presentation. Thanks for sharing all of those details and all of that context for what the governor has proposed in his budget. We know that the budget is an essential component and part of setting policy in California, and certainly around the master plan for aging. As one of the questions that came in for Kim Mccoy Wade about the budget, we need to make sure that we have sufficient funding to accomplish the many initiatives and goals that have been set in the master plan for aging. So this is really a critical piece of the process. And I imagine something that you all, when we're in our advocacy program later today, will have the opportunity to share with legislatures just how important it is that they get policy right and enact some of the bills that we put forward that are policy bills, and also that they make the investments that are necessary in order to ensure that that we can accomplish what we set out to accomplish in the master plan. So it was great to be able to hear from so many members of the administration this morning, from Fig, from Kim, from Adam. As you can see, we think that there's a real commitment from the administration on aging issues and on the master plan for aging. And that commitment's only going to stay there if we keep up our advocacy and continue to have events like today. So like Adam said, we really thank the California Senior Legislature for putting this event on, and all of you that are participating. We have a little bit more of our presentations and speakers today. And then, at 1 o'clock is when we're going to go into the advocacy program, and I'll be sharing some more instructions for how to participate in that program a bit later. But for now, I want to pass it on to our next set of speakers. We're going to hear from Sarah Steenhausen and Claire Ramsey. So Sarah is the Director of Policy and Advocacy with the SCAN Foundation, and Claire is a senior attorney at Justice and Aging, and we work together at Justice and Aging. Both Sarah and Claire have been really members of the stakeholder process that really built the master plan for aging, and now in making sure that it becomes real. They've both been working as part of a legislative committee, stakeholders that are helping to identify and monitor progress on pieces of legislation that connect to the master plan. And Claire was recently named the co-chair of the new community living committee that was established by the master plan for aging. So they both have a lot of information, a lot of expertise as to what's happening now, and advice for what we all need to be doing together to keep the momentum up on the master plan. So they're going to provide updates on where things stand today. And then after their presentations, there's going to be a question and answer period. So you can submit questions through the platform here. And Sarah and Claire will get to as many of those questions as they can. And I'll be back after their presentation. So Sarah and Claire, welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. And everyone, we're very happy to be here with you today to really talk about California's master plan for aging and how we turn that master plan into action and advocacy to achieve the 5 big goals that you heard about earlier from Kim. As Kevin said, I'm Claire Ramsey, and I'm a senior staff attorney with Justice and Aging, and I'm going to start by turning it over to Sarah to kick us off.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Claire. It's such an honor to be here, and what a fantastic program. Just very excellent engagement from their state lead and calling out such important issues that I think Claire and I want to highlight in our presentation. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So what we're going to do today is we want to start by looking back. We've had such an important year on so many levels, so difficult, so challenging, but it's had a lot of implications for our service delivery system and for the master plan. So we want to start by setting the context for why your work matters so much. Second, we want to focus on where the action is. And I think you heard such great information from Kim and from Adam as well. And Claire is going to take it from there and really focus in on the 5 goal areas and look at the key budget and legislative items to help inform your thinking as you move into your advocacy day. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with kind of some concluding thoughts on what is needed now and into the future to realize the goals of the master plan for aging. Next slide, please. So let's start by looking back. Next slide. I think about the past year, and when I put this slide together, it was pretty unbelievable to think about the unbelievable challenges that older adults, people with disabilities, faced in our state. Particularly given the fact that it highlighted some of the long-standing economic, racial disparities, health disparities that impact so much of the population. We had natural disasters that also impacted older adults and people with disabilities. We had to switch our program models from congregate settings to home delivered. You saw the community-based adult services program had to turn on a dime and figure out how to deliver services to people in their home setting. We had tremendous political challenges in the country. We had an devastating economic downfall around this time last year. And I think you all recall that at this time last year, we were facing incredible reductions to the core programs and services that meet the needs of this population. So fortunately, we're in a much better place now. It doesn't mean the problems have been solved, but I think the challenges of the past year built a lot of resilience among older adults, people with disabilities, and caregivers. Highlighted the fact that we have a lot of work to do. It really, I think, unmasked for a broader part of the population the challenges facing this system and this population. And I think it made the work of the Master Plan for Aging even all the more important. So next slide, please. This is why there is such hope for change right now. We have an incredible framework for a Master Plan on Aging, but as Claire and I will discuss, this is really where the work begins. A plan in itself isn't going to lead to change. We need together to partner and figure out how we can sustain our advocacy moving forward. So we want to start by looking into the bold goals and where the key activities are, both administratively, in the budget, and in legislation, and where you all can play a role. So with that, I want to turn it over to Claire and get going on the real meat of our discussion.
So if we can go to the next slide, please. And thanks, Sarah. So we really are going to frame this up using the Master Plan for Aging rubric, which had those 5 bold goals. And hopefully all of you have access to or have already looked at the legislative list that is laid out according to those goals. And so you know sort of what's happening right now in the legislature. And we're going to obviously talk about that more, but just want to make sure you guys know we have this reference material for you. Next slide, please. Oh, and Sarah, did you, I realized, I think you're going to talk about this.
Claire and I tag team a lot. So we're just tagging a lot right now. Yes, I think it's important to, we've discussed a lot, we heard from Kim, speaking a lot about the role of equity within the Master Plan for Aging. And I think when you hear Claire talk about each of the 5 bold goals, you'll see that equity issues really are at the center of all the work that underlies the Master Plan. And it's particularly critical given that everything we have seen occur in the past year, and again, highlighting where the real disparities exist in our system, we have to be very, very intentional about uplifting equity in all the work across the Master Plan for Aging and across the goals. Next slide, please. The other really important component to think about is leadership. I think we all know that the success of this plan relies on leadership, not only at the state level, but also at the local level, and also in our own advocacy efforts. We need to all be leaders in our work, and we all need to play a role in this as we move forward with the Master Plan for Aging. So now Claire will get into the 5 goals and what the energy is across those.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
Next slide.
Yeah, and so we're just going to stay on this slide just for a second because there's some context too around what we're working on that I wanted to give everyone. And, you know, I think we had a really great set of sessions. I'm really excited to have heard from everyone else who spoke before because I think you can all tell there is so much going on. And for those of you that have been advocates for a long time or been working on behalf of older adults and people with disabilities for a long time, this really feels kind of amazing and like we've really turned a page and are in a new era of focus and importance and emphasis on what do people need to age in place, what do they need to age in dignity and safely. And so this, I think, is just one more component of that. We're really got a lot of energy moving at the state level around a lot of different issues. So that's great. As Adam and I think Kim both mentioned, everything is sort of universally good news too, which is not always how these presentations go. And we do have the May revise coming out in a little over a week. But you know, the expectation is that things just look so different from last year in a budget situation, sort of with people's bandwidth to work on new issues, that we're really going to be moving forward, I think, in a new way. So I know I'm just like, and I think Sarah, hopefully don't mind me speaking for you too. I think we're both just really optimistic that we are not just stuck with a plan that's going to sit on a shelf. And that was something else we talked about a lot in our committee work, which is we're pouring a lot of work and effort. A lot of people did, as Kim said, there were more than 800 stakeholder comments. So people were engaged, but we don't want all that work to go to waste. We really want to see the action happen. I'm going to walk us through the 5 goals. We're really going to focus on some major themes and proposals. And I am going to touch on both legislation and budget, but there's certainly more than we can go over in this brief amount of time. So I do want to make sure people have their list to look at and refer to it for like specifics around bills and bill numbers. And just a reminder for people where things are at legislatively. Basically, everything is still in its first house. So if it's an AB, it's in the Assembly. If it's an SB, it's in the Senate. And things are basically, most things have moved through their first policy committee at minimum. Some things have moved through 2 policy committees. A lot of things are in appropriations on suspense, waiting to either get off or to pause there for the year. So that's going to be a lot of legislative momentum, but really our attention is going to turn for the next month or so to the budget. And with the budget, you can see that we really have sort of this push-pull between making ongoing investments and really looking at one-time spending. So I think that's something that's a tension. We want both. And we just, some of this money that Adam talked about is one-time only, so we want to be careful. But also we don't want to necessarily settle for just one-time investments when there are so many ongoing needs that are happening. And one last thing I'll just draw your attention to is there are several bills that are sponsored by the California Senior Legislature. Those are called out on the handout as well. And just want to thank them for their leadership in this space and always, every single year, being a voice for older adults and pushing forward on these bills. And it's just, I think a lot of other organizations really catching up to do some of this hard work alongside them. So just really happy to see how many, both that CSL is so engaged as always, and that so many other people are engaged as well. Next slide, please. So our first goal, as Kim mentioned, is housing for all ages and stages. And the housing goal, I really encourage everyone to go back and look at the actual master plan for aging that was released in January. This housing goal is about housing, but it also includes more than that, including transportation, disaster planning, climate readiness. So it really is a big goal. And there are several bills that you'll see. Just want to mention a few. Actually already saw one pass in the housing space, and this was the extension of the eviction moratorium until June 30th of this year. But we also have some pretty large bills. One, a really significant investments around homelessness, including the unique needs of older adults who are homeless. There's a bill to expand the Home Safe program, which some of you may be familiar with, that's being run through Adult Protective Services. And that bill would also lower the age on APS and expand their funding, and all that with an eye toward really helping older adults, independent adults who are involved in the APS system, who may either be at risk of homelessness or who have become homeless, really helping them stabilize their housing. And that's been, Home Safe's been a project that's been piloted, and we're hoping to expand. And then there's also a bill to think about how to pair supportive services with housing. This bill specifically is around nursing services with housing, but this is part of a larger conversation. And when we talk about health, you'll hear more about LTS, long-term services and supports needs. But I think people are really trying to see this housing goal as pretty dynamic and really attacking it from multiple angles. In the budget, there are also some housing proposals. The biggest ones are in the governor's budgets. There's $250 million proposed to purchase and rehabilitate adult residential facilities and residential care facilities for the elderly, so ARFs and RCFEs. And then another $750 million to purchase permanent housing. That one's not only focused on older adults, but could significantly help. And I think those are one-time investments. And I think one of the things that we're going to need to keep pushing on is how do we keep expanding our affordable housing supply within California. And I think that can be done globally, but I think there's a real conversation to be had about how do we think about housing for older adults and people with disabilities that's both affordable and accessible and can maybe, if needed, have supportive services surround it. So there's a bigger conversation. We're not seeing everything this year, but we're definitely moving forward. Next slide, please.
Claire, can I just add one thing about that goal one? You touched on it, but I think what's really important to recognize, and this is something that I know Debbie Toth has been speaking a lot about, is there's still a lot of progress to make, particularly in the transportation realm. So while there's not a lot of activity and focus this year on budget and legislation on transportation issues, I think we all are thinking about how we can together partner on these issues and really push forward active advocacy in the transportation arena. Because without transportation, if you address the housing issue, you're still going to have a number of challenges for people who are stuck in their own homes.
Thanks so much for saying that, Sarah. And I think you'll feel this theme throughout as Sarah and I finish up this presentation. But this is sort of this, I want everyone to see this as a great start, but not where we want to end. So I think, this is the beginning, not the end of what we're working on. So I think that's just going to be true throughout. And what's going to make those things happen is sustained advocacy. So that's absolutely right. So goal 2 is on health. And there are, as you can see from the list, a lot of bills around health. It's the biggest area this year where there's really investments. And sometimes that's because health has been an area that just has had more focus and sort of more opportunities, I think, for people in the run up to this. And some of these other opportunities feel more new. So I think, we're going to work to get more bills next year, the year after in other spaces and places. But it's always great to see investment in health because the health goal is huge and it encompasses both like sort of what people might think of as pure like medical health type issues and long-term services and supports. So some major themes. There are a number of bills to make Medi-Cal more accessible and affordable. So there's a bill to eliminate the Medi-Cal asset test. There's a bill to expand Medi-Cal to seniors regardless of immigration status. So that would cover undocumented seniors. There's a bill to increase the maintenance need level for people living in nursing homes, which right now it's $35, raise it to $80, so that's significant. There are several bills about increasing access to long-term services and supports. To be clear though, most of these bills are not about increasing like slot capacity or just simple expansions. They're usually, most of these bills have to do with flexibilities, making things work better for people, continuing things that were allowed during COVID that may not typically have been allowed around how services delivered, to Sarah's point around how CBAS has shifted, PACE has had shifts. Some of those really helped and worked. And so continuing some of those. So I think there's some really strong stuff in the LTSS arena, but there's also work to be done to think about, we certainly don't have enough services and supports for everyone and to meet all the needs. So we really need to think about that as well. There are several bills focused around more regulation of skilled nursing facilities. And to Kim and Kevin's conversation earlier around that, is really, I think, a sustained conversation to be had about what institutional and congregate care looks like in California, how it's regulated, how do we make sure that it's very person-centered and people are safe and healthy when they do need that level of care. And then last, there's a lot of focus on telehealth and technologies. We know that There's also places where digital divide, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but really this is really focusing on, again, on continuing some of the health flexibilities that really helped this year. And I'll just quickly mention in the budget arena, a lot of these things are mirrored in the budget. And for those of you who follow the budget and legislation, you'll see that there can be a lot of duplication and a lot of things get accomplished through the budget, even though there were bills. So you may see stuff get decided much more quickly than you anticipate if you're just tracking the bills. And I'll just mention that on the budget side, there is a huge proposal from the Department of Healthcare Services called CalAIM. And that has a lot of implications over numerous years for older adults, and that will be a work in progress, but the funding is being asked for now. And then there is the federal American Rescue Plan that has a 10% increase in Medi-Cal dollars for home and community-based services. And we don't know how that's going to play out yet because we're hoping to see where that heads in the May revise and in the discussions between the legislature and the governor. Sarah, anything else on health before I go on?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great summary of all the different issues covered. One thing that kind of sticks out to me, I was thinking about our work in the LTSS subcommittee and the recommendations that the report that the subcommittee put forward. And it highlighted, you know, really essential elements of system change, which is access to the services that people need, which is some of the highlighted in the program adjustments that you mentioned. It's a more streamlined service delivery system, and that's where we think about better connections across health and LTSS. So when you talk about Health Reimagined, it's not just about health care. It's about rethinking the way we think of health to include social determinants of health, to include access to the services in the community that we need. So kind of streamlining the access. It's also about our workforce capacity. We have more supply necessary. A lot of those issues you'll talk about, I know, in the workforce goal. And it's about how we finance these services in the system. And that's where the budget obviously comes into play. I think one thing that is also important to highlight is that there's been this discussion ongoing about developing a public benefit for LTSS financing. And that is an issue that I think is continuing the discussion. The legislation is currently on hold, but I think what's important to recognize is that the issue hasn't been forgotten, and it will continue to be a critical element of the discussion of how we access long-term services and support. So that's all I had to add on to what you discussed.
Thanks, Sarah. That's all great. Next, please. So the next goal is inclusion and equity, not isolation. And again, like goal one, this is larger than it might sound because it also includes leadership, elder justice, equity initiatives, really is a broad category to advance the state and have our thinking be less programmatic and more global around how do we make change in this area. There are fewer bills being offered that we categorized in this area, but there are bills about strengthening elder abuse and financial elder abuse laws. There are bills about expanding internet access to RCFE residents. And as Adam, I won't repeat what Adam said, but he really listed several of the major budget proposals that really fall into this category and that you've heard about several times around the cabinet position, around Master Plan for Aging implementation dollars. So we really think this is one of those goals that we're going to continue to find the policy like vehicles to move things forward, but also some of these are going to be, and I really always appreciate people coming back to former Assembly Member Cheryl Brown's comment about baked in, not sprinkled on, because I think what we're going to see from some of these equity initiatives is that they're going to have to be baked in programmatically to fix things. They can't be sort of external fixes to what really need to be programmatic fixes. Next slide, please. So goal 4 is caregiving that works. I'll just quickly mention there are efforts around the geriatric workforce that are really seen more as health care investments, and those were in goal 2. Caregiving, the goal here is really one more about the paid and unpaid direct care workforce, less and not so much the medical workforce. Right now, the bills are largely focused around paid family leave expansion, and The budget does contain some additional proposals, including more money for Caregiver Resource Center, supports for unpaid caregivers across the state, and like a pilot around career pathways that's been successful in Contra Costa. But I think this is a place where some deep discussions have to happen around how do we create those both well-paid and high-quality jobs. And this is not an easy one because this is about significant both investment and really thinking about our workforce in a different way and in a way that we haven't, I think, really reckoned with. You know, we have an amazing caregiving workforce in California, and it's largely women and women of color, but we don't always spend the investments we need to make sure that they have good, stable jobs. And so this is going to be a big money investment as well as really thinking about the people infrastructure needed. Any other points, Sarah?
Yeah, no, I think you really did a great job in highlighting the main points. One thing I would also highlight is, you know, in thinking about caregiving, also thinking about the critical role that family caregivers play, given that, you know, they are 2/3 of long-term care workforce providing services to people in their homes and a real linchpin of that. So I think that there are some stakeholder advocate proposals focused on increasing resources for the caregiver resource centers, if I'm correct, and other related initiatives. And finally, I would say that in kind of along with the challenge of meeting the needs of the direct care workforce is the issue of cultural competency and ensuring that we have a workforce that is able to provide to the wide range of diverse needs that our older adults and people with disabilities have. So how can we ensure that there's appropriate access to caregivers who speak people's languages, who understand their culture and their needs? Again, it's just another element of the challenges that we face, but I think it's one of these issues that we're going to have to just really commit to over the next few years.
I think that's really right, Sarah. And I think it's really a good example of how these equity considerations flow right into these caregiving concerns as well, and how, again, they're inextricably linked together. Next slide, please. And now we're into goal 5, affording aging. Affording aging deals with both income security as well as food security, and just sort of people having enough resources to live their life. There is only one bill we found that really falls into the affording aging, and it's around simplifying CalFresh applications for people 60 and over. And that would be great because just sometimes stuff like that might sound meaningless or like, okay, it's a simpler application, but you know, in our public benefit system, administrative barriers keep people off the program. They have real life consequences. So this is great. And we already had a big budget win as well on this. The state passed the Golden State Stimulus, and that included $600 for both people who file for the Earned Income Tax Credit, but also for people who are on SSI in the state. So that was a really big deal. SSI recipients especially had been very much left out of some of the other stimulus packages. So this was like their first real chance to get an actual bump given how many extra expenses they had. And then I will say there are a number of other stakeholder requests around affording aging. And a lot of them do center on food security in a lot of different arenas. To Adam's point, you know, CalFresh is one piece of our food security programs, but we have a ton of programs under Older Americans Act. We have other you know, food banks and other ways that we support people with food security. So this was there's a very broad set of requests for investment. And sort of with that, I want to be conscious of time and make sure we get time for little questions. I'm going to turn it back to Sarah for the last couple slides. So if we can go to the next slide, please.
Great. So now we want to talk about how we move forward now and what are the next steps in implementing the master plan. Next slide. So I think it's important to step back and think about what do we need to consider for plan success. There are certain elements that really, I think, need to be held at the front of our thinking as we move forward. The first, and we've talked about this, is the importance of leadership. at the state level from the governor and the administration, but also from the legislature, but also from all of us and our local and other private partners in implementing the master plan. The second is ensuring that there are real data elements that tie to the success of the plan so that we're able to track implementation and identify where their needs are. So that's why the data dashboard for aging is so important. And as we think about moving forward with all of the different budget and legislative elements that Claire outlined, we need to think about how does that actually play out in terms of our goals and measuring our success in implementing the master plan. But third, it's also important to remember the comprehensive nature of the master plan. This is not just about health, it's not just about LTSS or housing, but as Claire reviewed in all the 5 bold goals, it's about all of these issues. They all matter. And I think what's important to recognize is that Claire highlighted some of the big areas across the goals. And we also highlighted where there might not be as much movement. Under the affording aging goal, as an example, we have a lot of work to do. I think that aging, it's very easy to say, is unaffordable in this state. And we have a growing population of older adults and people with disabilities who are barely hanging on. So what can we do to address the needs across the spectrum for the master plan? And then fourth is stakeholder engagement. And this is something we'll talk about in a moment. We all need to be involved in implementing the master plan. So we need to take advantage of the opportunities that the state is laying out for us to advocate and advance the needs of these populations. And then fifth, and very importantly, is accountability. So how can we hold ourselves and the state accountable for ensuring that this plan moves forward, not just now, not just next year, but over the next 10 years, so that we can really transform the system. One thing I just want to note before we move to the next slide, there was a poll that was commissioned in April of this year, and 1,000 voters were polled on their perspectives on the master plan for aging. And it's really critical to know that voters of all ages strongly support the state's prioritizing and investing in the master plan for aging. So they looked at across the goal areas. Over 8 in 10 voters were supportive of those bold goals and of investing and implementing to ensure that older adults and people with disabilities can age with dignity. So this is something that's not just nice to do, but it's something that, and critical to do for our population, but it's something that our voters expect and demand. So next slide, please. Claire's going to now outline kind of the opportunities to engage the stakeholder level.
Yeah, and I'll be pretty quick because you've heard about several of these already, but there will be an impact committee, which is the implementation committee Kim mentioned earlier. That one is coming soon, and really we'll have a view toward sort of the whole master plan and making sure that we're not like leaving certain components behind. One of the questions I saw that we got had to do with like sort of support for family caregivers who leave jobs. I think that's really an area we don't have plans for yet, and that's going to need to be discussed much more rigorously and thought about much more broadly. We have the Disability and Aging Community Living Advisory Committee, DACLAC, which just got going last Friday. That one will be looking at housing, employment, transportation, and LTSS. So, that will be quarterly and a great place to engage and figure out where and how to plug in on those issues. Next, we have the Equity and Aging Advisory Committee. This committee has actually been ongoing since the master plan stakeholder process began just about the same time. Again, a great way to plug in on equity issues. People are thinking very broadly there. We have deep expertise around equity in that group, and really thinking next, I think, how we're bridging over from other committees working with the Equity Committee. And then last, an Elder Justice Council will be coming soon. This also is in the works and will really focus on the elder justice initiatives within the master plan and on what other and new opportunities there are. Next slide, please. We just wanted to give you some resources. There's the master plan website, Justice and Aging's information on the master plan and on related legislation. And then the SCAN Foundation has a number of resources on their website around the master plan as well. Next slide, please. And then this is our sort of our ending. So let Sarah start there.
Yeah, well, we just, we wanted to just kind of wrap up the main themes we've heard today. We know that this is a plan that we have to be committed to over the next several years. Our work is just beginning. But most importantly, everybody's voice matters. So while you're all here, and that's amazing, we need to think of ways to continue to engage our local level colleagues, our older adults, people with disabilities, families. As has been discussed earlier, and Kim mentioned, aging is everyone's business. This is not just about people over the age of 60 or 65. It's about adults with disabilities who need services and supports. It's about the caregivers that are living these issues every day. And we need to get to a place where, as was highlighted in the Stakeholder Advisory Committee report, how can we reimagine our state so that it's a place where everybody has the opportunity to age with dignity, respect, and independence, inclusive of all diversity of our population, with equity for everyone. So I just want to thank you, Claire, for partnering with me today on this presentation, and thank you all for the work that you do. I know you're all working hard advocating for these issues and engaging, so it's just fantastic to be here, and thank you to CSL. And now we're going to start with a few questions. So Claire, did you want to start off? We have just about 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. So first question was, what's your perspective on some of the federal dollars that might be available?
Yeah. That's a great question. As Adam pointed out, we have, and as Claire mentioned too, we anticipate significant funds coming down through the federal American Rescue Plan. And most significantly, I think in our area is this increase to the federal Medicaid percentage that is given to the state, which could be in a couple of $1 billion that come to California, specifically for Medicaid home and community-based services. Help people stay at home and in the community. The important thing to think about with this is that they're not ongoing expenditures necessarily. So we really have to think about important opportunities for one-time investments that can really help meet some of the infrastructure needs of our state. So I look forward to seeing what's in the May revise on this. But one thing that comes to mind that I think sounds kind of boring and blah, but is really important when you think about our master plan for aging work, and that's the issue of data. Right now, we have a really hard time tracking data across systems. We don't have a unified data system. We don't have a global warehouse to store our data, to understand how people are using services across programs, where the gaps are, where the needs are. And I think it would be really helpful in our work if we had that. So that's one idea. And Claire, did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to suggest?
Yeah, just a couple things I want to point out. I do really want to make sure California takes full advantage of this money, and that, we've used the word bold a lot in our conversation because state called these 5 bold goals. I think we have to really take that on and be bold in our advocacy. And I know the state is really seeing this money as one-time only money. And some of it, is going to definitely be used in that way. But I also want us to push the state as advocates and really say, how do we make sure that, how do we use this? If it can only be one-time investment, how do we make sure we're springboarding into expanded HCBS services, into people having a smoother transition into services, better navigation of services? How do we support our workforce? So there's lots of ways we could be investing in our workforce. Some of those can be one time, but some of those are going to need to be sustained. So, and the other thing is, I think people can really see the interconnectedness between what's happening in the state and what's happening federally. And so there's work to be done to say we need sustained federal investment as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing a few questions come through. I think we only have time for one, and I want to kind of combine them. Really excellent questions about, looking at other countries like Norway, have a broad safety net that supports older adults in aging in place. There's models to look at the state. What can we consider around that? So that gets to this kind of issue of LTSS financing. But along those same lines, a great question about how to support our family caregivers who might not be eligible for the IHSS program. What can we do to think about supporting both older adults and caregivers and people with disabilities so that they can age in place. Claire, what are your thoughts on that?
I have to be brief. I mean, I think first off, bringing those models forward and really talking about them and both being honest about the ways that they could work for California and about the challenges and how different some things might be between countries, between populations, between where we're starting and where we're trying to get to. So, you know, really being honest, but like, for example, Hawaii and Washington state have been able to pass private LTSS social insurance benefit programs. California is working, advocates are working to get that here too. It's a huge lift, as you can imagine. But there is like one really solid example of like, we've seen other states can do it. We know other countries can do it. California can do it. And we might need to say also, could the United States do it? And I think that's the other balancing act between what is properly within our jurisdiction as Californians and what should we really be pushing the federal government to do for all citizens across 50 states.
I definitely agree on that. And I think if you think about the federal government's role, another new poll that just came out, a national poll of Americans said that 60% of them believe that we need to consider how we can develop a program like Medicare that helps people pay for LTSS needs. And I think this could help, as you said, Claire, start thinking about this issue at the national level rather than just at, you know, the state by state level.
And I think, you know, just sort of, because I know we're wrapping up right now, I just want to echo the point that like, there are so many opportunities right now that I just hope people will stay engaged with all those opportunities while recognizing there are still many challenges for us to like meet and move forward on. And solving some of these problems are going to take real investment. So I think that's the other piece. And Sarah, the poll you guys conducted, I think was a great example of, you know, we always assume people don't want to spend money on anything, but that's not necessarily true. And I think people really, really see the value of this, and it affects everyone so personally. And that was mentioned yesterday when you released your poll. It's just such a personal issue for people. I think we need to really respect the fact that this is something that people value and want to invest in, and talk about it that way and advocate to our officials in that way.
Yeah, and I think you could argue that we are already paying for it. You know, we see that the rates of people having to spend down and go into poverty and end up on Medi-Cal is extremely high. Medi-Cal isn't really a safety net program anymore. It's one of the primary payers of LTSS. So how can we get to a place that we as a society are not forcing people to impoverish themselves to pay for what they need? So we could go on and on, Claire, but this was really fun, and I want to thank you all for your great questions and look forward to continuing this important work together. And thank you again for all you do.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And this has been.
So thank you, Claire and Sarah. I'm sorry, Claire, that we cut you off there at the end of your comments. So this has been a wonderful program. We have some closing statements and remarks coming up soon. But for a minute here, I want to make sure everybody understands the instructions for participating in the advocacy program. The advocacy program starts at 1 o'clock. It's really important that you participate, because this is the opportunity that you'll have to actually meet with legislatures and tell them what they should be doing for our communities. So from 1 to 2, the program will continue for those who have registered to participate in the advocacy program. There's 4 advocacy rooms that have been set up that will bring legislatures or their representatives together with Senior Rally Day participants. The rooms focus on the 5 master plan goals, and each of the legislators or the representative participating in the program will speak to a bill that they've introduced that relates to one of the 5 master plan for aging goals. What we ask is, if you've registered to participate in the advocacy program, at 12:45, you can navigate to the advocacy meeting tab, which is on the toolbar of the main lobby page in this platform. Go there, you click on the advocacy meeting drop-down tab, and this will direct you to the Zoom meeting for the advocacy room that you've registered for. Finally, we urge you to click the materials tab at the top of the lobby landing page and download the document titled, the title is here, it's 2021 Senior Rally Day Legislative Policy Positions. So this document outlines the legislation and the topics that will be covered in each of the advocacy rooms from 12 to 1, from 1 to 2. And additionally, by clicking the bill number in the document, you'll be linked to of what's happening with that bill right now. So again, 1245, we want you to click on the advocacy program will officially run from 1 to 2. With those instructions provided, we're going to move on to closing remarks for the first part of the program here today. Some of these remarks are being provided live, some are being recorded. Our first remarks are recorded from Assemblymember Adrc Nazarian. Assemblymember Nazarian is the chair of the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee. He was one of the opening speakers of the Senior Rally Day in 2019. And in 2019, he authored AB 1287, which proposed a no wrong door policy for accessing aging and disability services across the state. Since the introduction of AB 1287, he's taken a leadership role in aging issues within the legislature and in the development of the Master Plan for Aging. So we're thrilled here to hear from Assemblymember Nazarian.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm California State Assemblymember Adrc Nazarian and proud chair of the Assembly's Committee on Aging and Long-Term Care. I want to thank all of you for your continued engagement. During these prohibitive times, I know I can count on older Californians to pivot, regroup, and up your participation game. You are the model all should follow to engage in representative government. You have had an all-star lineup today. Justice in Aging is a champion for the rights of all, and the administration has never had stronger allies. Richard Figueroa has a wealth of experience, and Mccoy Wade is reinvigorating and restructuring how we address the needs of older adults and those living with disabilities. The Department of Aging is thriving and a welcome partner in so many ways. The Master Plan for Aging is a guide for us moving forward. As you have learned earlier, the 5 goals incorporate all aspects of living and thriving as we age. As we participate virtually, we grow stronger. It allows for participation from a greater group. We all come out stronger. I want to personally thank you for your advocacy work and ask you to remain committed to the path laid out in the Master Plan for Aging. You are making change from within, and I very much value all of your work. On behalf of my office and the Assembly Aging and Long-Term Care Committee, please keep connected, keep engaged, and I thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Nazarian, and thank you for your leadership on aging issues and your commitment and passion for this issue. It really comes through it when we work with you and your team. We're next going to hear from Christina Mills and Eric Dowdy. Christina Mills is the Executive Director of the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and she's a member of the California Collaborative for Long-Term Services and Supports. Eric Dowdy is the Chief Government Affairs Officer for Leading Age California, and is also a member of the California Collaborative for Long-Term Services and Supports. Christina and Eric have recorded a joint message on the Master Plan for Aging.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Eric Dowdy. I'm with Leading Age California. I'm also the chair of the board of directors for the California Collaborative for Long-Term Services and Supports. I want to welcome you to the 2021 Virtual Senior Rally Day. We're going to have a quick conversation about the Master Plan for Aging and what it means and where it's going. And I invite my colleague here to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations on your Advocacy Day. My name is Christina Mills. I'm the Executive Director of the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and lucky enough this year to work as Eric's Vice Chair for the California Collaborative for Long-Term Services and Supports. For those of you who do not know or are less familiar with our organization, we are a statewide disability rights organization that works as a membership for all of California's Centers for Independent Living.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Leading Age California, since I didn't include that, we represent the spectrum of services for nonprofit senior living and care providers. So everything from affordable housing, home and community-based services, skilled nursing, and assisted living, it's kind of the gamut. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Master Plan for Aging and just a little bit of history. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it. It started with an executive order in June that the governor transmitted and really called for a process to be put in place for a Master Plan for Aging development, and included the establishment of a Stakeholder Advisory Committee. Christina was on that Stakeholder Advisory Committee, so we're going to ask her a little bit of questions about that. So what was your thought on the process, and kind of how is it different than other previous attempts for building statewide recommendations?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. The Master Plan for Aging and the advisory members that were all appointed, I felt like I felt very honored and delighted to be a part of that process. And when we all were at the beginning coming together in the same room, I thought, wow, these are some amazing individuals that I'm going to learn from and help learn about disability as we go through this process. And I really think that it would have been drastically different had we not had the leadership of the director of California Department of Aging, Mccoy Wade, to really have known that bringing disability and aging together in California, there was no better time than now to make that happen. And with Kim's background in nonprofit, I had fortunately had an opportunity to work with her previously from that point. And I think that she really understood the value in bringing disability and aging together. So what I brought to the master plan process as a stakeholder, I think I gained at least 2 to 3 times more leaving it, because the work, I really value the work and the collaboration that aging partners have, that while disability and independent living, we work very well together. There's not nearly as many folks working on disability policy as there is aging. And I didn't realize that until I was a part of that process, and really feel thankful that all of my colleagues around the table really, I think, took the time to listen to what the disability and aging intersections are, to be able to take it to where it got in the final report and now bring it to where it needs to be over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then, Eric, for you, I know Janie, the executive director of your organization, was a part of the process, and I learned a tremendous amount from her as well. But you, like you mentioned, you have a ton of experience and background in public policy. And I'm just wondering, through your work in the aging area specifically, what has the master plan done to impact work for older adults?
Well, it's kind of amazing this time. As I have been working in this area for 23 years, and it's never made this level of impact. It hasn't been this prevalent in the conversation. We haven't a whole lot of attention from the legislature or the administration. So just putting kind of aging and disability issues on the map, this is really what the Master Plan for Aging has done. And then also the comprehensiveness of the overall document. I mean, it's touching really everything that we need to, although there are some glaring gaps. But it really is trying to pull everything together and kind of help in a holistic way, which we've never really seen. We've seen reports done where there's obvious problems, which is the Senate subcommittee under Carol Liu. She had that report, which was really helpful, but this plan is much broader, much larger, and kind of much more comprehensive, and include a lot of stakeholders, which we've never done in the past.
Yeah, so it's really amazing to be able to walk away from something, or roll away in my case, and think that we have a plan that's not going to sit on a shelf because we have too many pieces of, too many different stakeholders a part of the process that are going to hold each other accountable. It's awesome.
Yeah. And kind of to that point, it's a huge plan. It's 5 goals, 132 initiatives. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think is the most impactful of those for either the aging or the disability community?
Yeah, I keep the 5 priority goals next to me in all of my meetings to really make sure that I'm staying true to what we want to see over the next decade. And while each of them is really, really important, housing for all ages and stages, health reimagined, inclusion, equity, not isolation or segregation, caregiving that works and is a partnership. That's what I always add to that conversation. And then affording aging, my gosh, it's affording disability is a whole topic on its own, but really housing for all ages and stages. I think that we just have so much to do. It's almost daunting in California, the level of housing work that we have ahead of us that really needs to be completed in order for us to continue to allow people across the age spans with disabilities and older adults. I don't want to be forced out of California as I age simply because I can't afford my home or because my house isn't as accessible as I thought it needed to be as I age in place. So I really hope that we take into account that living somewhere that we can age in place, looking at programs and initiatives that build housing that is inclusive and allows people the access they need, but also the affordability. There's a lot of room for a lot of housing policy, and I think our group has the ability to get it right.
Right. Yeah, I second that on the housing piece. So housing and then financing, I think, is a close second. Those are huge, huge issues for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you know, you said there's some things that are just absolutely glaring that didn't become a part of the final plan. So transportation, in my opinion, is one of those things. And transportation continues to be an enormous need. I mean, it sits right next to housing and in the disability world. How important is it that we push transportation, even though it's not a priority in the MPA?
Yeah, well, I think that is huge. And it's something that I hear from our members all the time, even though there are transportation services in a lot of our member buildings. But if you build all these and you can't get to them, what is the point? So exactly. I think that's huge. And I think from a lot of years, transportation has been an issue even before the pandemic, but now we're in this scenario where there's fewer drivers, fewer services around, public transit's been cut back. So we really need a solution. And I think that is one of those glaring omissions that we probably need to take another look at really closely.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. And I think we're learning a lot through vaccine transportation processes right now too that will benefit our communities in the long run.
Exactly, yeah. Well, now talking a little bit about we have the plan, it has some work that we still need to do to it, but what about implementation of the plan? So the MPA website has this local playbook and a data dashboard. Tell me what you know about that and how you think that might be useful.
Yeah, so I'm really just ecstatic that we have a data dashboard to really make sure that we are completing what we set out to do in both the final plan and all of the initiatives that were sort of evolving as that process of the MPA was coming to a close. And then also all of the feedback, the tremendous feedback that we received from members of the community throughout the process. And I think in the end, there were over 800 recommendations. And you mentioned earlier, there's 132, policy pushes that we're moving forward. And it's the data dashboard that's going to really show us whether we're making progress and hitting the mark, our milestones, and actually completing those goals. So I know I look at the data dashboard online at least once a week. And I look forward to it evolving over time to show us what we've accomplished, but who's working on what and how to plug in. And that's really, that goes to say that the local collaboratives that the SCAN Foundation funds, the regional collaboratives that are working really hard right now to put together events for the playbooks. The playbook is seen as like a tool to determine locally what makes sense for your community and for you as an individual who wants to see the master plan be successful, how to plug in and figure out how do you use some of the local playbook strategies to fulfill the goals of the master plan. And so I really look at right now where we are and the evolution of where we've been. The playbook mixed with the dashboard, mixed with our statewide California collaborative on LTSS, I think that we have the perfect setup right now structurally to get what we want, to successfully complete what we set out to do, and to hold ourselves accountable because we have that online presence to make sure it happens.
Great.
And then, you know, for you, Eric, how do you see, where do you want to see, maybe is the better question. Where do you hope to see the master plan 5 years from now? That'll be our halfway point. So what do you want to see as a result of 5 years from today and where we got or what we've accomplished?
Yeah, well, I would hope we would have some solid movement on the big key issues around housing, funding at least designated, and getting shovels in the ground probably is not realistic in 5 years, but just getting the funding and making sure that we have the housing in the queue is really important. And then moving on to LTSS financing, leveraging our federal partnerships, I think will be really important. Because I know a lot of the master plan, there is some component for the federal, so having that really gelled and working and kind of seeing where we can make that happen, I think that would be really important. So just a lot of movement on, I think, those two issues, and I'd love to see everything go forward exactly how we planned, but I realize that's probably not realistic, but just keeping things moving. And I think, advocates like today at the Senior Rally Day, I think will be really important to make that happen. So maybe we could talk a little bit about how people can get involved.
Yeah, as a longtime statewide community organizer, the call to action is always the most important part of the game plan for me. So, I had mentioned the data dashboard and ways to hold each other accountable and make sure that the work is being done. But if, folks here today that are already plugged in, how are you plugged in beyond Senior Rally Day? Are you a part of your regional California Collaborative Coalition? Are you joining the webinars that the Department of Aging is putting on frequently to educate us and keep us updated on the processes and all the topics and information that we need to know as we move the plan forward? Have you gotten your colleagues and everybody else engaged in what the master plan is? And what part of the local playbook are you going to play out in your community? How have you taken your role as a leader over to the collaborative or to other aging and disability groups and coalitions to ensure that you're a part of that process, that everybody understands the great value in bringing disability and aging together, that neither one of those is forgotten in the conversations as we create policy, as we have those sausage-making discussions, both locally, regionally, and statewide. And, I would be remiss as vice chair if I didn't say also to please join our collaborative meetings so that you can constantly be getting information and insight on how you can plug into the work that we're doing statewide and how we could be of support to you and your local communities as well.
Great. Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much to the California Senior Legislature and all the work you're doing. And we hope to see you in the Capitol really soon and maybe at a collaborative event. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina and Eric, for that discussion. That was really great. I'd like to thank everybody who was involved in today's presentation and made a presentation. It was a really informative program. I know I learned a lot, and I hope that everybody out there feels equipped and ready to take the information you learned today and make good use of it in the advocacy program today. This concludes the presentation portion of the program. We're going to take a lunch break, give everybody a chance to get some nourishment, get up and stretch, take a little break from the screen. And during the lunch break, we ask you to please log back into the Senior Rally site using the login credentials that we emailed to you and revisit the lobby to view legislator messages as well as the exhibitors. Then at 1 p.m., the advocacy program will begin. Please note that you will need to return to the Rally site, which is the number 4, csl.org/senior-rally-day. So that's the number 4, csl.org/senior-rally-day. And when you're at that website, you can enter your login and access code. And this information was provided in your email for accessing the site that you should have received yesterday. As a reminder, while the advocacy program starts at 1, we'd like all pre-registered participants to arrive 15 minutes prior, so at 12:45, to give everybody a chance to get logged on. 2. After that, at 2:15, from 2:15 to 3, our premier sponsor, the California Supports, will be hosting a webinar entitled Knowing Our History, Exploring the Past and Future Directions of Disability and Aging in California. So all attendees are invited to join this webinar. You can access this webinar at the main lobby, and it'll be ready and available for you at 2:15. So thank you to the California Senior Legislature. Thank you to our presenters today, and thanks to all of you for being here. As everybody said, I think every presenter talked about the importance of adding our voices, the importance of all of you who have shown up at this rally day, of past rally days. It's because of you, because of your work, because of your voice, because of your energy that we've gotten as far as we have with the Master Plan for Aging. And it's only because of you will we be able to make the promises of that plan real. So thanks for being here today. Enjoy that advocacy program. And I can't wait to hopefully all be together in person again on that lawn next May, and hopefully celebrating lots of additional wins and making further plans for what we can do together to build a better California for people of all ages and all abilities. So thanks for being with us, and enjoy the rest of the program today.